Okay. Well, what would you like me to call you, Mr. Dale?
Beach.
Beach? All
Yep.
right. I'm Michael.
Michael, you bet.
Well, first of all, I'm a huge history guy. It's just an honor to meet World War II vets. I appreciate everything you guys have done for this country, and you guys are just part of the golden era. I really do think so.
That's nice. It was nice. It must be a nice, comfortable feeling. That's what I have about veterans. You bet.
I love veterans.
I was around a lot of them, so.
I guess my first question was, what year were you born?
In 1923.
In 23. And what was your hometown you were born in?
Ottawa, Iowa.
Ottawa, Iowa. What were your interests and hobbies in high school or junior high?
I play sports, of course, and that's about it.
What sports did you play?
I'm a hunter. I've been hunting since I was 9 years old.
9 years old.
So, yeah.
Now, did you play basketball? Because you seemed interested.
I played basketball and football.
Basketball and football. Okay. What is your favorite childhood memory?
Well, as I look back on it, I would say it was my family because there were 12 children in our family. And I look back on all the things that we did, and that's what I guess that would answer your question.
And where did you go to high school?
At Ottawa.
Just Ottawa Public High School? Where were you, and what were you doing when you heard World War II broke out?
When it broke out, if you don't mind, I'll tell you what happened to me. We was a chain of stores, and meat cutters were all being drafted. And so they came to the high school and asked, could they get a few guys that maybe would learn to cut meat? It plays an important part on what happened to me. The last semester of high school, I quit basketball, learned to cut meat. And when I was 18 years old, I was managing a meat market.
In the whole town?
Yeah.
It's been a big job. Now, were you drafted or did you volunteer?
I was drafted.
You were drafted, really?
I was drafted, and I knew the head of the draft board. And I was in Holstein, Iowa, cutting meat when I got my draft notice. I went to him. I wanted to join the Navy, but it was filled. Couldn't go in the Navy. He said, we need merchant marine. He said, what do you know about merchant marine? I said, nothing. He said, I don't either. And so there was a place in Des Moines, Iowa. And so I went there, and they accepted me. It was going to be several weeks before they would take me, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Also a place in Omaha for merchant marine. And so I had them transfer me there. Eventually, it would be probably the last of March or the 1st of April of 1943. We arrived, there's 50 of us in Omaha that went. We arrived at Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, New York. That's where we took our training.
Right.
And we got there at like about 2 o'clock in the morning. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, we had to get out and take shots. And then they take the 50 of us out and decide there's 3 places aboard ship to serve: deck, engine, and steward. And I thought it'd be kind of nice to be a deckhand and out there with the guns and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I thought I would do that. So they took me over with some of the guys, and there's ropes, about a room about this, all these ropes were hanging. You have to learn to tie all those ropes. I kidded the guy. I said, I just learned to tie my shoes.
Yeah.
But I just decided I had no business in deckhand. So I chose the steward's department. And so then in your training at Sheepshead Bay, it takes 8 weeks. And in your training, you have to train me as a steward for my duty aboard ship, what I'm going to be doing. I'm trained for that. And I'm also there trained for gunnery.
Right.
So I'm sent from the training to a hotel in New York City to await papers to designate where I would go. And this is where that meat cutting thing came in. The General Goethals in Boston, Massachusetts, needed a meat cutter.
Oh, okay.
And by saying I was fortunate is because those on transport had a lot better chance of survival than those that worked on regular merchant ships. We moved faster. We moved about 17 knots, which is like 20 miles an hour. And that's with convoys. So then I jumped on a bus, went to Boston, and I was real pleased to see this ship. I liked it right from the beginning. And General Goethals, they named the ship after him. He was the person most credit for the completion of the Panama Canal.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to make 7 crossings of the North Atlantic coming up.
There and
for the
back.
north. 7 crossings like that. And each time through the North Atlantic, and troops to places like Greenock, Glasgow, Scotland. And every night before we sail, I'd feel despair because I know the next day we're going out where all those subs are waiting for us. German subs are waiting for us, and also the bad weather. We always had bad weather in the North Atlantic. But the next day, when I get aboard ship and performing my duty, why that goes away. That's just part of. You can remember that. That's just it. The 6th crossing that we made in the North Atlantic, we delivered our troops to one of those cities in Scotland, and then they wanted us to go to Iceland, which is 1,000 miles, and pick up the 5th Division, Army Division. And so halfway, we encountered bad seas. The seas were like 40 and 45-foot seas, and we lost rudder control.
My gosh.
And so the ship wants to roll over. This is the closest I came to dying because I had a real good friend. He and I just were such great friends. We knew what we wanted to do. Of course, we had big old rubber uniforms or suits that we put on, but I put on every piece of clothing I could underneath that. And so we knew how we were going to get out, and we're going to release the raft and so forth. But a cadet from the Merchant Marine Academy figured out a way to control that rudder just to the extent that we could get back to Scotland. So we did that, and that was close. And let's see, that was the 5th trip. The 6th trip, we dropped our troops and went to Wales, the Cardiff and Swansea, Wales, to take troops aboard for the invasion, Normandy.
Oh, wow.
And so we were 2-3 days getting all that taken care of before we went in. And we had 4 of us big transports were going into Normandy. And the leading transport was Susan B. Anthony. And she was a Navy transport, but used the Merchant Marine to manage it. And she caught mines and went down in 12 minutes. And I found an individual here in Lincoln some years later that was on that ship. And I watched it go down. I watched it explode and the whole bit. But incidentally, those 4 transports that we had, the Susan B. Anthony, the Goethals, and the Berry, and there's a 4th transport. We carried 25,000 troops. So we had 100,000 troops in those 4 ships to invade Normandy. And
Wow.
Then we stayed in the area, and aboard ship, I told you I was a steward, but the Navy was armed guard. We had Navy armed guard on our ship. And the only thing is, on the 350 cannon, they only had was a pointer, trainer, and sight setter to shoot. And so they need somebody to put shells in that thing. So I volunteered to do that. I did that for 72 hours. Calvin 80, I should have been Calvin. Calvin's my real name, but Beach is a nickname. But Calvin Dale served as a member of the U.S. Naval Auxiliary Gun Crew aboard the United States Army Transport. General George W. Goethals from June 6th, that was when we broke into Normandy, to June 8th in 1944. Whereas he served as unselfish, and all that stuff, hostile invasion and so forth. And anyhow, we mariners served on guns with the Navy. Armed Guard weren't involved in conflict with the enemy. And I received this certificate and so forth for the 72 hours that I did there. And then the French government gave me this, the medal, for taking part in the Normandy invasion. So I like this.
Yeah.
Can you see that at all there?
Here, put it up to the camera so the
Well,
audience
maybe
sees.
I'll just put it on.
Put it on, that'd be a good idea. You zoom in on you. So you were doing this for 72 hours straight.
I was, yeah.
Did you
And we mostly were looking for E-boats. E-boat was like one of our Navy torpedo boats.
Mm.
And we think we hit one, but we never caught him at night. And so that's all we were doing the rest of that night was searching for those E-boats. And then also if we knew there was a mine in some area, we would have a sweeper come by and get it. So then this good friend of mine from Woonsocket, Rhode Island, we're just like that. We decided at that age, why don't we go and see what the Japs had to offer?
Oh,
And so we talked them into a transfer to send us to San Francisco,
Mhm.
and we had 8 days to do that. And we stopped in Ottawa, Iowa,
oh yeah.
and there were 7 guys home on leave. And after a beer at the Legion Club, we decided, let's go down and talk, because these guys played football with me. Let's go down and see what the coach says about maybe possibly we could take on the high school football team. Well, he couldn't say no.
Yeah.
And so the word got out the next day, and that night we had the lights on and we beat them. And the crowd was pulling for we guys. And so when we get to San Francisco, they gave us orders to go to Seattle. And in Seattle, we boarded a German Raider from World War I that we had. It was converted to carry about 600 troops. And we went to the Aleutians, did that 4 times, the Aleutian Islands, and back and forth and moving those troops around. And then they gave that ship to the Russians. They gave it to the Russians. And and then we boarded this converted cruise ship from peacetime. It was converted for troops, and we boarded that ship. And that ship would carry 2,500 troops. And so we went out into the Pacific and we took part in the Okinawa invasion.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we weren't as comfortable there.
Yeah.
Because they kamikazes.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was just bad. Those kamikazes, it was bad. I can't believe it that they do what they did. But anyhow, but we were there for about 3 days, and then we came back. I'm probably missing a few things here, but we then came back, and but I kept working my way up aboard ship, and eventually became the head of the stewardess department. There's 3 majors on the ship. I became a major. The head of the deck department, head of the engine department, head of the stewardess department are all majors. So I was kind of like that. And then we took that ship, the nice cruise ship, that Aconcagua. We took it through the Panama Canal to New York, and we were going to take prisoners, German prisoners, back to Germany, or Italian prisoners back to Italy. But all of a sudden, for some reason, they didn't want to do that. So we had to take our ship down to Newport News, which is a graveyard for ships. And so I had to stay 2-3 days for inventorying the ship's things, and then back to Seattle, which is my home port of embarkation, back to Seattle, and George Washington Carver.
Oh.
Is a brand new ship.
Yeah.
And made 2 trips to Hawaii, and that was it. At the time we came back, after that ship had to be went to dry dock for a few days, I got permission to leave the ship and go to Edinburgh, Scotland, and get on what was called the Flying Scotsman, the fastest train in the world. I took it to London to look up a friend, and I was so amazed that London was just bombed, something terrible. But anyhow, that cutting meat put me on Army transports, which is a good thing. Because in the Merchant Marine, 1 out of every 26 that served in the Merchant Marine was killed. 1 out of every 34 that served in the Marine Corps was killed. 1 out of every 58 the Army was killed. 1 out of 105 was killed, Navy, and the Coast Guard, 1 out of every 400.
How is this war different from any other war? If there is a
The atomic
difference?
bomb.
The atomic bomb. What advice do you have for any younger generations?
Well, take all the schooling you can get. Try to find out what it is that you like for a livelihood through life, and then pursue that through education. This tells you pretty much what a Merchant Marine was faced with during the war. And if you don't mind, would you mind if I read that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is called Action in the South Atlantic. One of the most dramatic acts of heroism beyond the call of duty occurred September 27, 1942, in the South Atlantic on the Liberty ship Stephen Hopkins. Unexpectedly, she came upon the heavily armed German raider Steer, disguised as a neutral ship, and her escort, the Tennefelds. When the Hopkins refused to surrender, both vessels shelled her mercifully. The Hopkins fought back valiantly until her gun crew at the stern was killed. With his ship in flames, engine room cadet Edwin O'Hara from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy took over and fired the last 5 shells, setting the Steer on fire. He was then killed by shrapnel. The Steer later blew up and sank. Captain Paul Buck, O'Hara, and 39 others went down with the ship. The 19 survivors accomplished an arduous 2,000-mile, 31-day voyage in a lifeboat to Brazil, during which 4 crewmen died. Buck, O'Hara, and 3 officers were given the Distinguished Service Award posthumously. The Hopkins received the Gallant Ship Award. The U.S. Merchant Marine Academy is the only federal academy authorized to carry the battle standard flag by virtue of her 142 killed.
Did you have any brothers that fought in any other branches?
Oh, yeah. In my family, there were 9 boys and 7 of them served. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one was served as also in the Merchant Marine. He made what's called the Murmansk Run. And it's one of the worst convoys that we sent to Murmansk. We couldn't get stuff into Russia except to go way up to around Norway and deliver tanks and all that, planes and all that stuff.
Mm.
We do that with convoys. This one convoy that my brother was in, there was 35 ships in the convoy, and only 17 of them survived. And that man was shot down, and he made it, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What did you do as soon as you returned home?
I met the mayor of Ottawa. He was a retired cut-in meat salesman, and he knew I'd cut meat, and he asked me, would you maybe like to try selling it?
Yeah.
And I said, you would do what I did. Let's sell it.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a little card and said, hire this guy. I took it to Sioux City to the sales manager. He put me in O'Neill, Nebraska, and I got things going a little bit out there. I was there 2 years. He brought me into Sioux City for 2 years. He sent me to Detroit for 2 years, and then Columbus, Ohio for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And then they wanted me to go back to Detroit, and Detroit was doing this, and so I retired from Cudahy Packing Company. Had a little girl, 2 years old. Went back to Iowa, and I formed with a couple of the guys. We formed a food brokers. So I'm a retired food broker. You know anything about food brokers?
I do not. No.
Yeah, well, if you made a product, we represented about 45 companies. Everything from Duracell batteries to Clorox. You know, the manufacturer would build something to sell to the consumers. But the only thing is, he had to hire a salesman and give him a car and buy insurance. He could come to we brokers. We could do that for him for maybe 3% or 4%. That's how it worked.
Huh.
And I retired at 60. I've been retired 36 years.
That's nice. Do you have any regrets?
No.
No regrets?
No.
It's a good thing.
I feel real good about it. The Merchant Marine, it was in 1941, the ship's owners, the unions, and the government got together and decided the Merchant Marine were always civilians. Classification with civilians. So we went into the war as civilians. We never knew that. We took a gun, we did everything. And so when the war's over, we didn't qualify for the GI Bill. That's bad.
That's stupid.
Yeah. And so that was kind of bad. In 1988, 3 guys that had been sunk on ships and stuff, they were so bitter about that, they went to work on it, and they got us veteran status.
Yeah, you better get veteran status. I was gonna say.
So I can go to the VA when I need to and all that stuff. Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say that's not okay.
Yeah, it was too bad.